What happened next will restore your faith in humanity and show you the true power of respect. A young biker thought it was funny to mock an elderly veteran's salute at a traffic light in downtown Phoenix. He laughed, revved his engine, and drove off thinking he was cool. But 30 minutes later, something extraordinary happened that left him speechless and changed his perspective forever. Stay with me because this story will show you exactly why you should never disrespect those who served our country and what happens when an entire military community decides to teach someone a lesson they'll never forget. Welcome to Honor Echoes, where we share the untold stories of America's heroes. I'm here to bring you real stories about the men and women who've sacrificed everything for our freedom. And today's story is one that perfectly demonstrates the unbreakable bond within our military community. Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure to subscribe to Honor Echoes so you never miss these powerful veteran stories that need to be heard. It was a typical Tuesday morning in Phoenix, Arizona. The desert sun was already blazing at 9 a.m., and the traffic on Central Avenue was building up as usual. At the intersection of Central and Camelback, an elderly man named Harold Mitchell sat behind the wheel of his pristine 1976 Ford pickup truck. At 90 years old, Harold still drove himself everywhere, refusing to give up his independence despite his family's concerns. Harold wasn't just any elderly driver. He was a decorated World War II veteran who had served in the Pacific Theater, surviving the brutal battles of Iwo Jima and Okinawa. His truck bore the telltale signs of a proud veteran: a Purple Heart license plate, multiple service decals on the rear window, and a small American flag mounted on the antenna that fluttered in the Arizona breeze. This particular morning, Harold was heading to the VA hospital for his monthly checkup. As he sat at the red light, he noticed something that made his heart swell with pride. A military convoy was approaching from the opposite direction, likely heading back to Luke Air Force Base after a training exercise. Without hesitation, Harold did what came naturally to him after 7 decades of military brotherhood. He straightened his shoulders, raised his weathered right hand to his temple, and delivered a crisp, respectful salute to his fellow service members. It was a moment of pure respect, one veteran honoring others who had chosen to serve. Harold's salute was steady and dignified, a gesture that spoke volumes about honor, sacrifice, and the unbreakable bonds forged in service to country. The soldiers in the convoy, seeing this elderly veteran's tribute, returned his salute with equal respect and precision. But Harold wasn't the only one who noticed the military convoy. Next to him at the traffic light sat 24-year-old Marcus Thompson on his modified Harley-Davidson. Marcus was everything Harold wasn't: young, brash, and completely disconnected from any sense of military tradition or respect. He wore a leather jacket covered in patches that celebrated rebellion rather than service, and his bike was loud enough to wake the dead. When Marcus saw Harold's salute, instead of recognizing it for the respectful gesture it was, he burst into laughter. He pointed at Harold and made exaggerated, mocking salute motions with his own hand, clearly finding the elderly veteran's actions ridiculous. Marcus revved his engine loudly, drowning out the respectful moment, and when the light turned green, he sped off with a roar, still chuckling to himself about what he perceived as some old man's silly ritual. Harold saw the mockery. The disrespect hit him like a physical blow, not because his feelings were hurt, but because it represented everything wrong with how some people viewed military service and sacrifice. Harold had watched friends die on foreign beaches, had carried wounded comrades to safety, and had earned every ribbon and medal displayed in his home. To see his simple gesture of respect turned into a joke was heartbreaking, but Harold didn't know that someone else had witnessed the entire exchange. Staff Sergeant Maria Rodriguez was driving her personal vehicle 2 cars behind Harold when she observed the whole incident. Maria was a 20-year Army veteran currently stationed at Luke Air Force Base, and she was heading to work when she saw Marcus's disrespectful display. Maria's blood boiled as she watched the young biker mock a veteran who was clearly decades older and deserving of respect. She had served 3 tours in Afghanistan and had lost too many friends to let such disrespect slide. As soon as she arrived at the base, Maria did something that would change Marcus's day completely. She immediately went to her commanding officer, Colonel James Patterson, and reported what she had witnessed. But Maria didn't stop there. She posted about the incident on the base's internal communications network, describing the elderly veteran's dignified salute and the biker's cruel mockery. She included details about Harold's truck, his Purple Heart plates, and the approximate time and location of the incident. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within 15 minutes, Maria's post had been shared by dozens of service members. Within 30 minutes, it had reached every corner of Luke Air Force Base and had been forwarded to nearby military installations, including Davis-Monthan Air Force Base and the Marine Corps Air Station Yuma. The military community was outraged. These men and women understood sacrifice in ways that Marcus never could. They had buried friends, had missed their children's birthdays while deployed, and had put their lives on the line for people they would never meet. To them, Harold's salute represented everything sacred about military service, and Marcus's mockery was an insult to every person who had ever worn a uniform. Colonel Patterson made a decision that would send a clear message about respecting veterans. He authorized an impromptu convoy to locate the disrespectful biker and deliver a lesson in respect. Within 45 minutes of Maria's report, 23 military vehicles were rolling through Phoenix with one mission: find Marcus Thompson and show him what military brotherhood really means. Meanwhile, Marcus was completely oblivious to the storm he had created. He had stopped at a gas station about 10 miles from where he had mocked Harold, filling up his tank and bragging to anyone who would listen about his morning encounter with the crazy old man playing soldier. Marcus thought he was hilarious, reenacting Harold's salute for the amusement of other customers, completely unaware that he was about to receive an education in respect. As Marcus pulled back onto the highway, he noticed something unusual in his mirrors. Military vehicles were appearing behind him, and more were joining from side streets. At first, he thought it was just a coincidence, maybe another training exercise. But as the convoy grew larger and began to position vehicles around him, Marcus started to realize that this wasn't random. The convoy expertly maneuvered Marcus toward a wide section of highway where they could safely execute their plan. Using standard military convoy tactics, they gradually surrounded the biker, with vehicles in front, behind, and on both sides. Marcus found himself at the center of an impressive display of military precision and coordination. When the lead vehicle activated its emergency lights, Marcus had no choice but to pull over. His heart was racing as he watched 23 military vehicles create a protective perimeter around him. Soldiers began exiting their vehicles, and Marcus suddenly found himself face to face with some of the most disciplined and respected members of society. Colonel Patterson approached Marcus first, his bearing and presence commanding immediate attention. The colonel didn't shout or threaten. Instead, he spoke with the calm authority that comes from years of leadership and service. He explained to Marcus exactly why they were there, describing how his disrespectful behavior toward a 90-year-old veteran had been witnessed and reported. Marcus tried to laugh it off at first, claiming it was just a joke and that the old man shouldn't take things so seriously. But as Colonel Patterson began to explain Harold's likely service record, the significance of his Purple Heart plates, and what veterans of Harold's generation had sacrificed, Marcus's attitude began to shift. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez stepped forward and shared her own story of service, describing the friends she had lost and the sacrifices made by military families. Other soldiers began sharing their experiences, painting a picture of dedication, honor, and sacrifice that Marcus had never considered. The young biker learned that Harold's generation had saved the world from fascism, that Purple Heart recipients had been wounded in combat while fighting for freedom, and that the simple salute he had mocked was a sacred tradition connecting all who had served. Each soldier's story added another layer to Marcus's growing understanding of what he had witnessed and disrespected. But the military personnel weren't finished. They explained to Marcus that they had been searching for Harold to thank him personally for his service and to apologize on behalf of everyone who witnessed the disrespect. They asked Marcus if he would be willing to join them in finding Harold and making things right. The weight of his actions finally hit Marcus like a freight train. He realized that his thoughtless mockery hadn't just hurt one old man's feelings. It had insulted an entire community of people who had dedicated their lives to protecting others. He saw the disappointment in the soldier's eyes and understood that he had failed a basic test of human decency. Marcus agreed to help find Harold, and the convoy began a systematic search of the area. They checked the VA hospital, knowing that many veterans had regular appointments there. Sure enough, they found Harold's distinctive pickup truck in the hospital parking lot. Harold was just finishing his appointment when he emerged to find his truck surrounded by military vehicles and dozens of service members standing at attention. For a moment, he was confused and slightly concerned, wondering if something was wrong. Colonel Patterson approached Harold and explained the situation. He told Harold about Maria's report, about the base's response, and about their mission to show proper respect to a fellow veteran. Harold was overwhelmed by the gesture, his eyes filling with tears as he realized that his military family had rallied to his defense. But the most powerful moment came when Marcus stepped forward. The young biker, now completely humbled, approached Harold with genuine remorse. He apologized sincerely for his disrespectful behavior, admitting that he had been ignorant about military service and the sacrifices made by veterans. Marcus asked Harold to tell him about his service, and for the next hour, Harold shared stories from his time in the Pacific. He talked about the friends he had lost, the battles he had fought, and the pride he still felt in having served his country. Marcus listened intently, asking questions and beginning to understand the true meaning behind the salute he had mocked. The encounter concluded with a ceremony that none of the participants would ever forget. Harold, surrounded by his military family, delivered another salute, this time returned by every service member present, including Marcus, who had learned to salute properly during their conversation. The convoy escorted Harold home, ensuring he arrived safely and knew that he was valued and respected by his community. Marcus followed along, having asked if he could visit Harold again to learn more about military history and service. In the weeks that followed, Marcus became a regular visitor to Harold's home. He helped with yard work, listened to more war stories, and even accompanied Harold to veteran events. The young man who had once mocked military service became one of its most vocal supporters, sharing Harold's stories and educating others about the importance of respecting veterans. Marcus also began volunteering at the local VA hospital, spending time with elderly veterans and learning about their experiences. He discovered that many of these men and women had incredible stories of courage and sacrifice, stories that deserved to be heard and honored rather than mocked. The incident taught Marcus valuable lessons about respect, humility, and the true cost of freedom. He learned that the elderly veteran he had mocked was a genuine American hero, someone who had risked everything so that future generations could enjoy the liberties they often took for granted. Harold, for his part, was deeply moved by the military community's response and by Marcus's transformation. He had spent decades worrying that younger generations didn't understand or appreciate military service. But this experience showed him that respect and honor could still be taught and learned. The story spread throughout the military community and beyond, becoming a powerful example of how veterans support each other and how education can transform ignorance into respect. It demonstrated that military brotherhood doesn't end with retirement or discharge, but continues throughout a veteran's lifetime. Colonel Patterson later said that the convoy operation was one of the most important missions he had ever authorized, not because it involved combat or complex strategy, but because it upheld the values that military service represents: honor, respect, and protection of those who have served. The incident also highlighted the importance of recognizing veterans in our communities. Harold's simple salute at that traffic light was a reminder that heroes live among us, often unrecognized and unacknowledged for their service and sacrifice. For Marcus, the experience became a defining moment in his life. He had learned that true strength doesn't come from mocking others or displaying false bravado, but from understanding, respecting, and supporting those who have dedicated their lives to something greater than themselves. This story shows us that respect for our veterans isn't just about ceremonies or holidays. It's about recognizing the daily acts of honor and sacrifice that continue long after military service ends. Harold's salute at that traffic light wasn't just a gesture. It was a testament to a lifetime of service and an unbreakable bond with his fellow veterans. If this story moved you like it moved me, please subscribe to Honor Echoes to hear more incredible stories about America's heroes. These stories need to be told, and these veterans deserve to be remembered and honored. Hit that subscribe button, leave a comment sharing your thoughts about respecting our veterans, and make sure to watch our next video about a Vietnam veteran whose quick thinking saved an entire neighborhood. Until next time, remember to honor those who serve.